Night Out online. This is a place that I love to come monthly as a mentor for moms. It is always my privilege to come in and be an encouragement to other moms, to help build them up, to help give them practical, real information and tips that they can go in and feel refreshed by the evening and go back into their parenting mode with their family, refreshed and with new ideas on how to be the mom that God's called them to be. And tonight we're going to discuss, not perfect, but intentional. Yet this is another part of what I'm sharing as I'm writing the book, The Intentional Parent, which I am hoping and praying will be ready by the end of this year. And as I'm writing it and as I'm trusting God that this message is exactly what moms need to hear, want to hear, exactly what He has to say to them, I like to come in and just share part of that with you all, just to give you an idea of where I'm headed and what I'm working on, and to show you all how much you are a part of what I'm doing. So I always like for you to know that I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that as you're sitting listening to me, you've got your favorite drink. And I'd love to hear in the chat box what that might be. I am sitting here with a big bottle of water so that if my throat gets a little dry while I'm talking to you tonight, I can sip on that. But perhaps you're sitting there with a nice decaf cup of coffee, or you're taking in a nice warm cup of tea or something else that's yummy, and I welcome that. For those of you who don't know me or who are still getting to know me, my name is Susan C., and now I'm on your screen double, so I'm going to switch this slide. I want you to know that I'm here for you. What I call the work that I do, that I believe God has called me to, I call it a mentor for moms. And I know that there are different terms out there for what people do. You know, some people call themselves parenting experts. I never feel comfortable with that title because I'm not even sure you can be an expert in parenting. But I believe that you can absolutely mentor. And as I've been a mom for the past almost 19 years, I have one that's almost 19, so I guess almost 20 years, because I was a mom from the moment that he was placed there. I have had many experiences that I think that I could share that would be a blessing and an encouragement to other moms. I think that there are things that in my life have helped me, and if I can share them with you and help you, we're all the better for it. Not to mention that over the years, I've put myself through so many multiple trainings and seminars and workshops, and I'll be working soon on a certification training, that I use those tools that I've learned to help moms. So what I get together in a mentoring session, it's never just idle chit-chat. I don't actually like chit-chat at all. It's very purposeful conversations that help to move and propel you forward. So if you ever feel like you're in that place where you could help, where you feel stuck and you could use some help in moving forward, reach out to me. You can connect with me via Facebook. You can connect with me via email. I'm here for you. Reach out. Let's have a conversation. I'd love to do that. Lots of times people are curious about my kiddos, and there they are. There's all 7 of them. Yes, there's 1 boy and 6 girls. The boy there is my oldest, and he is going to be graduating soon. We're going to be having a graduation celebration. He has finished high school, and it is time to celebrate that moment. And that is something that we realize as a family we need to do more of. I'm not sure if it's true in your family as well, but we have all kinds of accomplishments and great things that actually end up happening in our home, and we don't take the time that we should to actually celebrate those moments. So I look forward to celebrating his achievement of completing high school, of completing, I forget the final count, but several college credits where I believe he'll either be a late sophomore in college or approaching junior very, very quickly. So he's done amazing things, and I'm happy to celebrate him. So as I said tonight, we are going to be talking about not perfect, but intentional. And we're going to be talking about how perfectionism can show up in our mothering and in our parenting and in our families, and how that is just a tool of the enemy to keep us distracted. If we go back and remember our conversations in the past, we talk about the difference between being distracted and being intentional, and how the two can be on a continuum or a long line where one is on one end of the line and one is on the exact opposite, extreme opposite end. And when we think about the difference between being distracted and intentional, it would be very easy for us to think about the difference between Sally being intentional and Sue being distracted. But the key is that Sally and Sue can be both distracted and intentional. The key is where they are at any given moment. They can slide up and down that continuum at any particular time. And the same is true for Brenda and Cindy and Jerry and Patty. Each one of us have this ripe opportunity in each moment that we get to choose into being intentional, or we get to choose whether we're going to be distracted. And a lot of times that choice is not a conscious choice. We're not, I'm going to choose to be distracted. It's just simply we went unconscious in that moment. And so I'm going to talk about what that looks like when we get unconscious. How does that show up in our world? So I want to start off by talking about how in our culture we applaud and we reward people who have high standards, major achievements, those who seem successful, they're reaching for the stars. Maybe they have smart kids, or they have talented kids, or the husband is making a lot of money or has his own business. Like, there's so many different areas in life that the world and our culture, they'll look at and they'll applaud those things. But what we can miss sometimes is that underneath those achievements, there is this push and this striving and this personal taking on of the burden of achieving those things that leads to a sense of that leads to stress, that leads to worry, that leads to anxiety, that leads to depression, it leads to all of these other things, because it's not rooted and grounded in a working out of their faith in God, and in the process they achieve these things. It is I want to achieve a level of success. If I get this certain GPA, then I am, and they fill in the blank with a meaning. If I make this amount of money, then I am, and they fill in the blank with some meaning. And when we applaud that, it merely rewards behavior that wasn't necessarily rooted in the way God created us to be and what God desires of us. And so should we not applaud? That's not at all what I'm saying. But I do want us to be aware that perfectionism, that striving for better and more can be rewarded. And so it becomes tricky to not do things that you actually get rewarded for doing. Can you follow that with me? Like, you get rewarded for having these great achievements. It seems wrong, and it seems hard to say, I'm going to walk away from that efforting to get that, because that applause feels good. That recognition feels good. But when we are being intentional, we're so much less focused on perfection, and we're more concerned with being content. You see, contentment is one of those ways that we can shift on that continuum from distracted to a purpose-driven and intentional parent. Because the key is, if your actions are deliberate, yet you lack peace, you're not truly intentional, not in the way that I'm describing it. Because there's many different parenting styles out there that would love the message of being an intentional parent, meaning that they're very deliberate in the choices that they make. They're very conscious of what outcomes and what goals they want to achieve. Think about Tiger Mom. Ever heard of that? Or you heard maybe helicopter parenting, or you've heard of child-led parenting. On some level, these parents are making choices with a desire to make a big difference. But in the end, they don't necessarily do that with peace in mind. There's no acknowledgement within those parenting styles that God's plan is more important than our own plan for our children. And there's no acceptance that maybe things are not working out the way we planned, and that could be the greatest gift we could ever receive. Instead, there's this push and push and push for more, better grades or better performance in music talents or smarter in the science field or creating something new or inventing. There's a push and a push and a push. Where the intentional parent that I'm talking about is the intentional parent who is content but is accepting, or I shouldn't say but, and is accepting that God has a bigger plan. But sometimes we slip into being distracted, all of us. Not some of us, and not those moms, those things we do where we point fingers, If you're a stay-at-home mom, it's those working moms. Or if you're a married mom or a single mom, it's those married moms. Like everyone has those that they point to, the people who are in opposite camps, so we say. But if you're around me at all, you will know that I say we're all in the same boat. Motherhood is universal in its challenges and its victories and its celebrations and its hardships. It's universal across the board. There are not some of us who have hardship and some of us who never do. All of us have victories, all of us have losses, all of us have hardship, and all of us have celebrations. And that is universal. And if we can remember that, we can remove this distinction of a us and a them and say a we. We as moms all can be distracted. And so tonight we're going to share a few ways. I'm going to share a few ways with you where you can look for signs that you are distracted. So feel free to grab your pen and paper, take notes, look for things that God is going to reveal to you and show to you as I'm teaching tonight, that you can begin to become more aware. Because how do you change anything? How do you shift out of one place in their relationship and understanding of God and who He's created you to be into another place where you can become more like Christ, where you can step into what He truly has for you? What the difference is in that is awareness. And for us as believers, how does that awareness come? It is a prompting and a leading of the Holy Spirit. And I say that I believe each one of you are here by design, by divine appointment, no accidents, no mistakes. Because if I could let you in on a little secret, I had an entirely different lesson that I was going to teach tonight. And earlier today, I felt led to teach this one. So I believe that there's something in this message that's personally designed for each one of you who are joining us tonight. Each one of you that are here, there's something that God wants to say through me to you tonight. And that's why I get so excited for the moms who show up, because it is a message that God is tailoring to you. And you get to receive it and chew on it and spend time on it and pray about it and see exactly what God is saying. So here we go. One of the signs that you're in distracted mode is you're overly focused on pleasing others. See, there's nothing wrong with us pleasing others. There's nothing wrong with the desire to see others pleased. But we can get to a place where we're so in the mode of fear of man, fear of reaction, fear of rejection, such a desire of acceptance by others, that we go into the place of overly focused on pleasing others. We can even do that with our children, where we don't like to see them disappointed, or we don't want to see them hurt, or we don't want to have them be upset. So we go and we give and we overly focus on pleasing them, and it is not an honor to God. It's actually creating a distraction from what God desires us to do. So if you find yourself overly focused on the pleasing of others, that's one ding, 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 ding sign and awareness in distracted mode. Another one is you're a driven individual, but your drive is hurting your relationships. Any moms in the group here who can recognize, hey, I am a get her done kind of mom. Like, I have my goals, I have my agenda, I have my to-do list, I have my plans, I have my goals set out, and I'm ready to go. When I hit the floor in the morning, there's no question about what it is I need to get done. If you have a question about that, ask me, because I know it's this. Okay, I see one that's saying boom. Okay, like that. You get it. You're a driven individual, but if you find that your drive is hurting your relationships, that's a sign you've shifted into distraction. To know that God has created you to have that sense of get or done, to have a person who's of action and making it happen is a gift and from the God who created you. But when we get into that place of my agenda becomes more important than the people that are right in front of me, then we know that we have shifted on that continuum. We're not in intentionality anymore. We've moved into distraction. Here's another. Your standards are stressful and somewhat unreasonable. Okay, so that is a misspell for anybody who caught that. I see that. It's unreasonable is what it should say. And how many of us have standards that stress us out? Like we created the standard and then our own standards stress us out. Maybe you've set a standard that my house should be clean and it should be this level of clean, and you could define what that looks like. But keeping it that way stresses you out. Or maybe you have a standard about the way a meal should be served or the type of meal that should be served. And trying to achieve that stresses you out. And sometimes it's just flat out unreasonable. I have talked to mothers over the years who just gave birth to a baby, and they've got other little ones and other children in the home, and yet somehow they're still trying to honor their commitments at church or trying to go in and be of service to other moms and help them out, or they're trying to still keep the routine that they had before the baby arrived. And at some point, you have to say, that's just not reasonable for where you are right now. You're dealing with the stress on your body. You're dealing with lack of sleep. You're dealing with the little one who needs so much time and attention. Maybe that standard needs to be relaxed for a moment. Maybe it's time to back off of that just for a season. It can even stress you out to think about laying down the standards because you're like, oh, no, who will pick it up? And will we ever get back to it? And will laziness become a new norm? It doesn't have to be that extreme. But the standards sometimes that we set become a distraction all in and of themselves because they keep us from being focused on the purpose that God has. Another way that we can have a sign that we're distracted is procrastination. And I think this one will strike across the board. Everyone on some level can relate to this. That procrastination time when we, in spite of our desire to get stuff done, we tend to put things off. We tend to delay. We kind of hold back. We kind of avoid certain tasks or certain to-dos on our do list just never seem to get done. That's when we can distract ourselves from actually getting done something we're being prompted to do. And we use procrastination as a tool for that. Let's see the next one. You become highly critical of yourself and others. Oh, is this a big one? Like, hello, I have heard moms say things about themselves they would never say about another person. You would never call another person, oh my gosh, you're such an idiot. Well, maybe you would, but you shouldn't. But I've heard moms say that about themselves. Oh, I'm such an idiot. Why didn't I do that? And whoa, don't do that. What is going on? That is distracting because that is not at all what God says about you. He never has and he never will. And you can become so critical of yourself and so critical of others. It's a painful experience for yourself, and it's definitely a painful experience for others. But when we are distracted, maybe by our own fears or our own hurts or our own disappointment, we tend to get into a mode of being critical. And that only seems to disconnect us even more from the fact that we are born with a purpose and for a purpose, and that God wants to work that out through us. Another one is you have a hard time opening up to others. Anyone relate to this one? Like you have a lot of people that you know, but not a lot of people who really know you. You have people that you're around, but you're not really connected to them. And it's because deep down you have a hard time opening up to others. Maybe it's something that you just don't trust a lot of people. Maybe it's the fact that you've been hurt, and so you feel at least safer keeping things to yourself. But that is not at all how God created us. We could go back to Genesis, and God says flat out, it is not good for man to be alone. Yes, he was talking about Adam, but I think that principle is true for all of us that he has created, all of the Adams, all of man that he's created. He did not create us to be alone. So anytime we choose into the not opening up to others, we're robbing ourselves of the connections, and it's through the connections to other people where God sends so many blessings and so many answers and so many ideas and so many solutions. And so we're cutting ourselves off, and that's how we know that it's a distraction. Anytime we find ourselves cutting off the opportunity for us to connect one to another. Here's another. You can always point out the mistake or the exception. Anybody, I wonder if any of you ladies are like that. I know I've got family members that are like that. That no matter what you say, they can say, oh, yeah, but what about this point or this point or that point, right? But maybe this is what it could look like in your family. You could say, the living room may be clean, but your eye goes right to that one sock that's on the floor. Or your child washed their face, but you can see and you point out that they forgot to clean their ears. Or your husband took out the trash, but he forgot to put a new liner in the can. There's always that one thing that you can point out. It becomes the yeah, but. Yeah, but, and then you fill in the blank with whatever that is, right? That's when we're distracted. Certainly, that's not God's heart, is that we would continually find that one thing that we can keep pointing out the mistake, pointing out the exception, pointing out how things just aren't done quite right. The next one. Oh, this one. This is the time that I'm glad that I'm on picture and I can't really see your faces. You take things personally. I got to tell you about me. I'll do true confessions of Susan. There were times when I felt like my children were acting up just to like bug me, just to bother me. Somehow I took their tantrum or their lack of follow-through or their lack of doing their chores personally. Like they didn't wash those dishes so that when I came in here to cook dinner and the kitchen was still a mess, and they did that just to spite me or they did that just to bother me. Somehow I made that about me. I hope you're laughing with me. I hope you could see that somehow I made that about me. I could do that about anything now. I could do it about traffic. These people are just out here, and they know I have somewhere to go, and yet they are not moving. Or the person who cuts over in front of me on the highway. What? Were they trying to wreck my car? Were they trying to get me all upset? Somehow it's me. Me and me and me again and me. We take things personally. That is a distraction. That is definitely not being intentional. Another is you get defensive when people confront you. And I'm going to say if people confront you, because I got to say confrontation is one of the most loving things you can do if done with love as a motivation. But I don't know that it's all that common for people to do anymore. I could be wrong. And your reaction to that when someone confronts you or when someone wants to have an open and honest and direct conversation with you can tell you whether you're in intention or whether you're in distraction. Because we could just snatch into offense and what? I cannot believe they said that to me, or we can go into all these different directions. But when we're intentional, we can see behind someone coming to us confronting, and we can be willing to look for the thread of truth. And I purposefully call it the thread of truth because on some it is their experience of whatever it is they're sharing, which does not mean it's the whole truth. But there can be a thread of truth that if we're willing, we can hear that and receive the blessing of that. But if we're distracted by, well, I didn't like the way they said that to me, or who are they to tell me that, or I am doing just fine, what are they talking about? Like, come on, ladies. Like, anybody with me on this? Like, anybody ever had this opportunity to be offended instead of just taking the thread of truth? And the next one is mommy guilt drives your actions more than you care to admit. This is one of the drivers behind a lot of conversations that I have with moms. They feel guilty about so many things. They feel guilty that they're not spending enough time with their kids, or they feel guilty that they're not spending enough money on their kids, or they feel guilty that their child is dealing with some type of health challenge. And surely I could have eaten better, or I could have, if I would have only known. Or recently a mom, her daughter was sick, and she's like, oh, if I would have only known sooner, she wouldn't have had to suffer so long. It's like all of these moments of guilt, and it drives so many of the decisions that they make. Well, it's summertime, and I haven't taken my kids to the pool a whole lot, and I feel kind of guilty about that. So I've been, and you fill in the blank with whatever you then do to make up for that guilt. Guilt drives moms more than we are willing to admit to one another, and I have some answers for that. So what we're going to go back through is I've laid out some signs, and we're going to go back, and we're going to show the shift. Because I would never, ever come into a group of moms and say, here's all the ways you can see that you're distracted. Okay, ladies, have a good night. Bye. I think, what? That is a cliffhanger on a really ragged, jagged, dangerous, scary cliff. And I would never leave you there. I'm going to show you the cliff and point to it and say it's over there. And then I'm going to say, here's a way that you never have to ever go visit that. That doesn't have to be your experience. So if you find yourself in distraction, let's talk about what it would look like to shift that, to turn it around. So if you find yourself overly focused on pleasing others, shift that to creating a commitment to pleasing God and loving those He places in your path. Recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not all warm and fuzzy. Sometimes it looks like an honest conversation. Sometimes it looks like a confrontation. Sometimes it looks like a direct statement. But let the focus be on pleasing God and loving. And, love is patient, love is kind, love is honest, all of that God's Word tells us love is, loving the people that He's placed in front of you. Recognizing that if you're pleasing God, you're pleasing the most important one, and you can't help but love and treat the people around you right the more you focus on loving and honoring Him. That's shifting from distracted to intentional. How about if you're a driven person? Allow driven to become accepting the call that God has placed on your life. You see, being driven represents a perspective that you're responsible for everything. It's a feeling of being pushed forward by your circumstances and whatever is urgent. But being called, that recognizes that God has a well-thought-out plan and purpose for your life, and you get to accept that plan. And it's a feeling of an inner sense of purpose that you get to release in partnership with God. Doesn't that just even feel better that I'm driven? Sometimes the world would recognize and reward a driven person. Oh man, they just go forward and they get things done. But all we can go back to story after story after story in God's Word and see people who accepted the call that God had on their lives, and they achieved such amazing things that we still talk about them to this day. Driven people, you might applaud them today, but tomorrow it may be forgotten. But those who have accepted the call that God uniquely placed upon their lives, and they were faithful to step into partnership with God and honor that call, that creates a lasting impact that goes into eternity. Nothing short-term and temporary about that. The next one, your standards are stressful and somewhat unreasonable. That becomes I'm sorry, I'm looking through my notes. If you heard that pause, I'm just looking at my notes over here. You finding a way to achieve and lay out what you want to achieve and then submitting that in a humble way before God. You say, God, this is what I see and this is what I believe and this is what I want to achieve, but yet not my will, your will be done. That takes the pressure cooker, that takes the lid off the pressure cooker. That relieves the stress and the pressure that builds up. Because when our standards are in and of themselves, we created them, we're to hold them, we're to enforce them, that's where the stress comes from. Because life all outside of our plan is happening at all times. And it can become unreasonable to try to hold to that of God's plan that we understand. But if we're willing to take our hands off the lid, release the lid and the pressure, then we can say, God, here it is before you. Now have your way. You are in control. You are God. The next one, procrastination. This one becomes seeing things as the right thing at the right time. Sometimes procrastination is an avoidance, and other times it's a way that we determine and we can work out what's really important. Wisdom is knowing the difference. So if there is something that's truly important and you're avoiding it, that's a problem. But if you recognize that the things you are avoiding are not that important, it may be a case of the right thing at the right time. You see, in Ecclesiastes 3, chapter 1, it says, to everything there is a season and a time and to every purpose under heaven. So procrastination shifts in intentionality. It becomes the right thing at the right time. And then applying wisdom to say, is this the right thing for this time? And assigning a time to those things that God's called you to do. Becoming highly critical, let's talk about this one, of yourself and of others is really a sign of insecurity and fear. Insecurity is what happens to all of us when we focus on people and circumstances and not the one who is in charge of those people and in charge of those circumstances. When we focus on faults, we can shift our focus to becoming focused on the faultless one. So instead of focusing on faults, we focus on the faultless one, the one who never fails, the one who never lets us down, the one who never makes mistakes. And then we give grace to the mistakes that we do see. We give grace to ourselves. We give grace to our children. We give grace to our husbands. We give grace to our friends. Grace becomes our conversation. Grace fills our words. It becomes a part of our language. Not criticism, which breaks down, but grace, which heals and which builds up. I recently posted on Facebook, if you saw that, where I said encouragement and how that is a transference of courage from one to another. And that's what grace does, is it encourages, it builds up, and it lifts. The next one. There we go. you have a hard time opening up to others becomes a willingness to become vulnerable. You will lower the walls of self-protection and letting people getting to know you. This is truly risky business, but risk is truly a part of life. So when we have a hard time opening up to others and in distraction, we can shift to intentional of saying, I'm going to open up and share, but do recognize I'm not saying you do that everywhere. There is a such thing as an overshare, true? And so we can go overshare to the lady at the checkout in the grocery store, and she's like, wow, yeah, I would have been okay not knowing that. So you do choose those appropriate places where you're going to share, but opening up, recognizing that God designed you for connection, and God designed you to be in relationship with other people. And so when we create these modes of isolation within our homes and with our families, and we can do it so easily, we can just kind of decide, don't really like those neighbor kids, don't really like their family, or don't really trust them, or don't like that they don't share the same standards as us, and so you just cut off connection with them. Of course, there are going to be times when that's the most healthy and honoring choice to do that. But there's also times when we just get caught up in preferences on the smaller things. And then we find that over time that becomes such a habit that we have a hard time opening up all the way around. God does not desire for us to be in self-protective mode. He is our protector. We don't need to protect ourselves. God is our protector. He recognizes what we need, and He provides for that. He gives us wisdom to know how to act and what to say and when to say it, if we will trust Him in that. But let us not let our prejudices or our hang-ups or our judgments of others or ourselves become an excuse to say that that's what God has us to do. And, of course, being aware of those, because those are on a heart level, are going to be key with us deepening and enriching our relationship with Him. Now, Susan's posted in here, and she said, I'm sometimes critical of my children, ashamed to say that out loud, and I need the Lord's help to be more encouraging, highlight the positive, and inspire and uplift them. I can relate to that, Susan. I can so relate to that. I was just sharing recently how God has taught me a lot about personalities, and He used a 4-quadrant system in order to do that. And through understanding personalities and ways and perspectives, just in the unique way that God created us, I got to see one of my children in a whole new light. And understanding this has radically transformed our relationship, because I always saw her quietness as a lack of confidence. I saw her reservedness as shy and wrapped in fear. And no child of mine was going to be a fear-ridden lack of confidence. Like, I just could not handle that. So I looked for all the opportunities I could to help her not be that way. So I would look for opportunities to have her speak up in front of people, or stand up and ask questions, or go and confront someone who had done something wrong to her, not recognizing that I was creating the very thing that I did not want in her. I was creating more fear. I was creating more anxiety. I was creating more of her resistance to speaking up. But in my mind, I was helping my child to not be fearful and to not have confidence. I was helping her to be confident. But when I learned that her quiet ways sometimes were just as strong as my outspoken ways, and that God created both of us, and neither one of us had anything broken and nothing missing. It was a perfect created way. I got to see that my perspective was not always the way. I got to say, you know what? This is how God created her. And you can sometimes send the most powerful message in your silence. And I get to humble myself by saying, you don't always have to speak up in order to be heard. What a rich lesson for me. What a way to honor the way God created her. And the young lady that she is today is nothing like she was a year ago, and nothing like she was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when we went through this work. So unbelievably different. She truly is now the confident and strong young lady that I desired that she would be. But at the time, all I saw was the fear or the lack of confidence. So there's such work that God does in all of us. I truly call parenting the ultimate refiner's fire, that He shows us so much about ourselves in the midst of loving on these people that He places in our lives. It's one of the biggest gifts, best gifts ever. So let's move on. When you always have a knack of pointing out mistakes or the exception, to shift to intentional, that looks like pointing out God's goodness and His grace. So you get to celebrate the clean living room and just pick up the sock and move on. You get to thank your husband for taking the trash out and either remind him, hey, love, we need a trash can liner in the trash can, or just putting it in there. We get to see that our child remembered to wash their face. And then we can say, hey, great job, bud, on washing your face. And now you can say, how about you go back and do that same good job you did on your face, do it on your ears. And then you get to rejoice in God's goodness and point out how good God is. And you got to love on your family and have them see more of the smile on your face than the frown and the disappointment on your face. The next one, taking things personally, which represents a victim mentality. The opposite is to take personal responsibility. We get to shift over from a blaming, which is focusing on others, to personal responsibility with a focus on you and your reactions and your emotions and your state of mind, regardless of what others say and do. See, sometimes we like to say things as causation. Well, I'm upset because of the way they said that. Or I'm cranky because you guys kept me up. Or I'm, whatever, because of you. Or because of this circumstance. Or because this happened. When really, if we take personal responsibility, we could say, okay, truth is, I chose not to get up early, and that's why I'm late. Or I chose to react negatively to you when I could have taken the time to slow down and listen to what you had to say. I chose to jump to conclusions and not out. Those are choices. That's personal responsibility. That's owning the part that we play in every circumstance and really not taking other people's actions or lack of actions personally. Not taking personal responsibility is so pervasive in our culture at large. I agree. Yes, Susan and I, we're on the same page. The Susans are in connection tonight. I love it. Yes, so as moms, what a powerful message we send to our household when we step into person. When we step out of saying, I am this way because of, and we blame the kids, or we blame the dog, or we blame the cat, or we blame our husband, or we blame his job, or we blame whatever, right? That we get to move into a place where we accept personal responsibility for what's happening in our world. And we remove victimhood from our conversations. We absolutely remove it. The next one, the getting defensive is yet another self-protection mechanism that seems to work. See, when you're trying to preserve your self-image, that's when you can get defensive. It's a fear of being discovered or uncovered, and it's an attempt to cover ourselves the same way Adam and Eve hid in the garden. They hid behind plants, and then they hid behind clothing. And I think we can do the same thing now. We try to hide behind a veil of protection. Maybe it's behind busyness, or we'll hide behind a smile. And then we get defensive if someone confronts us. If someone looks like they might uncover the truth about us, we can get defensive about that. But the way to shift is to recognize that our righteousness, our standing, our image is a settled conversation. It's all wrapped up in God alone. What we wear, where we live, how much money we make or don't make, has nothing to do with God's viewpoint of us, of how important we are in His eyes. And if we can accept His standard of acceptance as the standard, then we can release the need to cover ourselves. We can release the need to protect ourselves and to put up any defenses one to another. And the last one, mommy guilt, shifts to becoming a freedom to be who God created you to be and to do what God created you to do. You get to be free from regret. Because you see, regrets happen when we argue that things can and should have been. I'm going to say that again. Regrets happen when we argue that things can and should have been different. So mommy guilt about, I didn't spend as much time with the kids as I wanted to. You can release the freedom to say, I believe that I was doing what God called me to do. And if you were not doing that and you were off and distracted by something, own it. And say, I flat out was not, I was distracted. I was off doing stuff that didn't even matter. But by God's grace, today or tomorrow is a new day. And I'll try again. And I'll go back. And I won't beat myself up. I won't somehow think ice cream will fix it, or cake will fix it, or brownies will fix it, or candy will fix it, or whatever it is your fix-it is. Maybe it's not food. Whatever your fix-it is, I'll go shopping, or I'll buy them something, or I'll, whatever your thing is. We all have a thing. Instead, let's commit that our desire when we're intentional is to be who God created us to be, and that may not look like anybody else around us, and that's okay. And we get to do what God created us to do and not one thing more. Not one thing more. What God created me to be, not one thing more. My final point is the shift from distracted to intentional requires a moment-by-moment effort and focus. That's our work. That's our daily task, is to continue to moment by moment make our effort and focus to be that God has created us with a purpose and for a purpose, and to live into that is the most honoring thing we could ever do. And to model that for our children gives a message that they are not an accident looking for somewhere to go to happen, that God created them and He has big plans for them, and they get to practice each day accepting that truth. And that, my friends, is what I wanted to share with you tonight. And that's what, for you that are joining me for the first time, that's what Mom's Night Out looks like. So this is the time that I open up. I see so many ladies have come in. Hello to each one of you. This is the time that I open up for questions, for your feedback. If you had an aha from what I taught tonight, I love to hear those things. If God showed you something or revealed something to you, I'd love to hear that. And so please use the chat box that's there on the screen. And I'm looking to hear from you in this moment. I want to know what's stirring in you, what's on your mind, what's on your heart. Patty says this was so good. I'm glad that you enjoyed this, Patty. I'm so glad to have you with us. Anyone else going to share tonight? Anyone else going to jump in? You are so welcome, Patty. Oh, you are so welcome, Jerry. Did you ladies, Patty, Jerry, or anyone else have anyone that particularly stood out to you? You're like, oh, that sign right there, that one's me. I see that. I see that one showing up. Ah, you're welcome, Susan. I am so glad that you were here. I've missed you. Glad to see that you're back. Let's come back. I'll be back again next month. I'll be here on the fourth Tuesday, which should be August the 25th if I looked at the calendar right. I'm always happy to come in and do these. And if you want to reach out to me, make sure you like my Facebook page. Make sure you shoot me an email. If you have something on your heart or mind, you have a quick question, you have, Susan, I want to connect with you and talk with you by phone. If you don't have a mentor in your life that is challenging you, that's encouraging you, that's building you up, but then that's also holding you accountable, give me a call. Let's get connected. Let's not let that continue to be your story. It doesn't have to be that way. And I'm happy to come in and be able to do that for you. Let's see, I missed a couple one. I was a little late to the party, but the part that I caught, definitely. Oh, nice. Awesome. Susan says, I could see myself in discussion. So much work to be done. Yes, and that's a good point, Susan. I will have a replay up. This is being recorded, and I'm always happy to put those up for you ladies. And, I don't see any questions coming through, so will say this. I'm always honored for each of you ladies that come. If you have other friends that you think would also benefit from that, share it with them. Let them know. If you want to have them know the dates, they can get on my email list on my website, where they'll get a free gift anyway, plus emails for a full month supporting them in how to be more intentional with their kids, to build strong relationships, which is a great gift, right? So if you want to give your friends a gift, share my website link so they can go there and get their gift. And then I'll continue to email them so that they're aware of when the Mom's Night Outs are, and give them a link where they can register and be ready for that. Also, for those of you who have not checked out, that I have a shop page on my website now, so you can go in there and get conversation starter cards. I have one set that's questions intentional parents ask their kids, and another one is 27 ways you can build relationships with your kids. If either one of those sets or both of those sets would help you and your family, check them out. Get a set. Bring them on home. They're gorgeous. For anybody who's seen them, they say the same. They're like, man, these are such good-looking cards. They really are, and I think you'll enjoy them and enjoy using them. And lastly, I've created a guide called the Mentor for Moms Guide to Core Values for Your Family. And that is a tool that I've created for you to go through and choose 3 core values that you and your family focus on for a full 12 months. And this guide will support you for a full year as you live out those core values. I actually have a course that I'm teaching that's going to start in just a couple weeks. It starts that first week of August with a group of people who are going to be going through the course that's for the people who own the guide. And if that's of something of interest to you, I welcome you to be a part of that course. Matter of fact, I have a special that's running for a Christian women in business organization, and I could send you a link that has a discounted code to that. On the website, it's one price, it's the full price, but I'd be happy to offer you ladies as well the discounted price. So if you want that link, email me, and I'll send you a special link to be able to get that. That is still available for the next few days, and I welcome you all to be a part of that. As always, ladies, it's fabulous to be with you. I'm glad that you came, and if you need me, reach out to me. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you ladies next month. Bye, ladies. Good night.